The bustling energy of the Brooklyn waterfront set the stage for what was supposed to be an ordinary day. Keanu Reeves, the world-renowned actor, stood on the set of his latest movie, leaning against a stack of crates as the midday sun reflected off the surrounding buildings. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he loosened the collar of his leather jacket, a signature part of his costume. The smell of asphalt and faint traces of hot dogs from nearby vendors created a sensory tapestry of city life. Cut. That's a wrap for this scene, shouted Marco Whitman, the film's director. His voice boomed across the set, prompting a collective sigh of relief from the crew. They had been at it since dawn, and the promise of a lunch break was music to everyone's ears. Keanu offered a polite smile to Marco before turning his attention to the pit bull seated loyally at his feet. The dog, named Rocco in the script, was panting from the heat. To Keanu, however, he was more than just a co-star. This four-legged companion was his partner in the scene and, for the day, his responsibility. "Hey, Keanu," called out Simon, the lighting technician, as he made his way toward a cluster of crew members gathered by the catering truck. "We're heading to Monty's Deli down the street. Want to tag along?" Keanu glanced at Rocco, whose ears perked up at the mention of food. "You guys go ahead," he replied with his trademark humility. "Rocco and I will find a quieter spot. He needs a break more than I do." The dog handler, a wiry man named Joel Briggs, hesitated as he handed the leash to Keanu. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Reeves? Rocco can be a bit of a handful." Keanu gave a reassuring nod. "I'll manage. It'll be good to spend some time with him. Besides," he added with a gentle chuckle, "I've always wondered what it's like to own a dog, even if it's just for a few hours." With the leash in hand, Keanu knelt down to Rocco's level. "Ready for an adventure, buddy?" he asked warmly. The dog's tail wagged enthusiastically, his earlier signs of discomfort momentarily forgotten. Keanu stood, adjusting the collapsible water bowl in his jacket pocket before leading Rocco toward the quiet streets of Brooklyn Heights. A walk with purpose. The midday heat radiated off the pavement, forming shimmering waves in the air as Keanu and Rocco made their way through the narrow streets. Trees provided sporadic patches of shade, and Keanu made a mental note to find water for Rocco soon. His eyes scanned the area, searching for a dog-friendly spot, when he noticed a small park just ahead. The sound of motorcycles rumbling nearby broke the tranquil moment. Keanu turned to see a group of bikers parked outside a gritty-looking establishment with a faded sign that read, "Steel Haven Bar." The building's weathered exterior and the loud laughter of its patrons hinted at the rough crowd it attracted. Keanu considered crossing the street to avoid the bar entirely but noticed a water fountain nestled near its entrance. "Perfect," he muttered under his breath, leading Rocco toward the fountain. He filled the silicone bowl with water and placed it in front of Rocco, who lapped it up eagerly. Keanu stood nearby, taking in the scene. The bikers, clad in leather vests adorned with skulls and flames, were engrossed in their conversation, paying little attention to the man and his dog. That peace didn't last long. A clash of temperaments. As Rocco finished his water, a heavy-set man with a shaved head and a jagged scar running down his cheek approached. His steps were slow and deliberate, the metallic clink of his boot chains adding to his menacing aura. He stopped a few feet away, arms crossed. "Nice dog," the man said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Keanu, sensing the underlying hostility, gave a polite nod. "Thanks." The man's sneer widened. "Don't see many guys like you walking around here. You lost?" Keanu didn't rise to the bait. "Just out for some fresh air with my friend here." Without warning, the man's boot lashed out, striking Rocco in the side. The dog yelped, more startled than hurt, and retreated behind Keanu. The air around them seemed to freeze as Keanu's calm demeanor shifted. "What the hell was that for?" Keanu demanded, his voice low but firm. The biker shrugged, his grin mocking. "Didn't like the way it looked at me." Keanu took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "He's a dog. And you don't mess with someone else's dog. The biker laughed, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes as he realized who he was dealing with. Relax, man. It's just a mutt. Rocco, sensing Keanu's tension, let out a low growl. The biker took a step back, raising his hands in mock surrender. Easy there, Hollywood. Didn't mean nothing by it. Keanu didn't reply. Instead, he knelt to check on Rocco, his touch soothing the agitated dog. Without another word, he stood, his gaze never leaving the bikers. The man held Keanu's stare for a moment before muttering something under his breath and retreating back to the group. A quiet resolve. Keanu led Rocco away from the bar, his thoughts swirling with anger and disbelief. They walked in silence for several blocks, the bustling noise of the city gradually receding into the background. They eventually found a shaded bench in a small park. Keanu sat down, stroking Rocco's fur in an effort to calm them both. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured. "We're not going to let one jerk ruin our day." As the sun began its slow descent, casting golden hues across the city, Keanu resolved to keep Rocco close for the rest of the afternoon. Little did he know, the day's challenges were far from over. The cool shade of the park provided a brief respite for Keanu and Rocco. Despite the unsettling encounter at the bar, Keanu felt a sense of calm return as the dog rested at his feet, his eyes half closed in contentment. The events of the day weighed on Keanu's mind, but he reminded himself that Rocco was safe now. Keanu's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. A text from the director reminded him that their break was nearing its end. He sighed, realizing he had lost track of time. "Come on, Rocco," he said, standing up. "Let's head back." As they made their way back toward the film set, Keanu noticed a quaint cafe tucked between two brownstones. Its outdoor seating area was shaded by a canopy of string lights, and the inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. Keanu decided it was the perfect spot for a quick break before returning to work. A friendly encounter. Keanu approached the cafe and found a small table near the edge of the patio. He tied Rocco's leash securely to the chair leg and sat down, signaling for a waitress. Within moments, a young woman with a cheerful demeanor arrived. Her name tag read Maggie, and her smile was warm and genuine. "Good afternoon," Maggie greeted, glancing down at Rocco. "What a handsome boy. Is he yours?" Keanu shook his head with a soft chuckle. "Not exactly. We're co-workers for the day." Maggie laughed, jotting down his order of a coffee and a sandwich. "I'll be right back," she promised, giving Rocco a quick pat on the head before heading inside. As Keanu waited, he pulled out the script he had been reviewing earlier, letting the familiar words ground him. Rocco lay quietly, his tail thumping lightly against the patio floor. The calm shatters. Keanu had just taken his first sip of coffee when the tranquility of the cafe was shattered. A burly man in a leather vest stomped across the patio, his heavy boots echoing against the pavement. Keanu's eyes narrowed as he recognized the biker from earlier. The man stopped in front of Keanu's table, his expression twisted with malice. "Filthy mutts don't belong on furniture," he spat, nodding toward Rocco. Before Keanu could respond, the biker's boot shot out, striking Rocco in the ribs. The dog let out a pained yelp and scrambled backward, his leash pulling taut against the chair leg. Gasps erupted from the nearby tables as the peaceful scene turned into chaos. Keanu shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the patio floor. His calm demeanor was replaced by a protective fury. "What is your problem?" he demanded, stepping between the biker and Rocco. The man sneered. "Maybe I just don't like dogs," he said, his tone mocking. "Or maybe I don't like their owners." Keanu's fists clenched, but he forced himself to remain composed. "Back off," he said, his voice low and steady. "Now." The biker hesitated, the intensity in Keanu's eyes giving him pause. For a moment, it seemed the confrontation would end there. But then the man leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper. "You're gonna regret this." He turned and walked away, but not before throwing a final glare over his shoulder. The tension in the air lingered even after he disappeared from sight. Rocco's condition worsens. Keanu knelt beside Rocco, gently running his hands over the dog's body to check for injuries. "It's okay, buddy," he murmured, his voice softening. "We're getting out of here." Maggie rushed over, her face pale with concern. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't realize that man would." "It's not your fault," Keanu assured her. "But I need to find a vet. Do you know of one nearby?" Maggie nodded quickly. "There's a clinic about 3 blocks from here. Just head straight down and take a left at the intersection." Keanu gave her a grateful nod, leaving money on the table for his meal. As he stood, however, Rocco's legs wobbled, and the dog collapsed onto his side with a low whimper. Panic gripped Keanu as he scooped Rocco into his arms. The dog's weight was substantial, but adrenaline lent him strength. Without another word, he took off in the direction Maggie had indicated, his heart pounding with fear. A race against time. The streets blurred around Keanu as he sprinted toward the clinic, Rocco cradled protectively in his arms. Passers-by turned to stare at the sight of the actor running with a large pit bull, but Keanu didn't care. His focus was solely on getting Rocco the help he needed. The clinic's white facade came into view, its Blue Cross sign glowing like a beacon of hope. Keanu burst through the doors, his voice hoarse as he called out, "I need help. My dog's been hurt." The reception area erupted into action. A woman in scrubs, her name tag read Dr. Harper, quickly approached. "Bring him this way," she directed, leading Keanu to an examination room. Keanu gently placed Rocco on the metal table, his hands lingering on the dog's fur. "Please," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Do whatever you can to save him." Dr. Harper nodded, her expression calm but focused. "We'll do everything we can. Just wait here." As the medical team worked, Keanu stepped back into the waiting area. The sterile smell of the clinic and the low hum of equipment only heightened his anxiety. He paced the room, his thoughts racing with guilt and worry. Keanu sat in the clinic's waiting room, the sterile atmosphere doing little to soothe his nerves. Every tick of the wall-mounted clock felt like a hammer striking his chest. His mind raced with worst-case scenarios as he replayed the events of the afternoon, each detail of Rocco's injury eating away at him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Harper appeared in the doorway. Her face was calm but serious, carrying the weight of difficult news. "Mr. Reeves," she began, stepping closer. "Rocco is stable for now, but his condition is serious. May I speak with you privately?" Keanu stood immediately, his stomach nodding. "Of course," he said, following her into a small consultation room. A grim diagnosis. Inside, Dr. Harper gestured for Keanu to sit, but he remained standing. "Rocco is showing clear symptoms of poisoning," she explained. "Based on his rapid decline, we suspect he ingested a substance mixed with narcotics or rodenticides." Keanu's blood ran cold as her words sank in. "You mean, someone did this on purpose?" Dr. Harper nodded gravely. "Given what you've described about the earlier incident, it seems deliberate. The good news is that you got him here quickly. We've administered activated charcoal to absorb the toxins and started him on 4 fluids to stabilize his condition." Keanu clenched his fists, struggling to suppress his anger. "What are his chances?" Dr. Harper's expression softened. "He's responding well so far, but the next 24 hours will be critical. We'll need to monitor him closely for any signs of organ damage." Keanu nodded, his jaw tight. "Thank you for everything you're doing." Dr. Harper placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll take good care of him. In the meantime, I'd recommend contacting the authorities about what happened. This kind of cruelty shouldn't go unreported." Seeking justice. As Keanu returned to the waiting area, his resolve hardened. He wouldn't let the person responsible for this get away with it. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used, Sheriff Hank Morrison, an old friend from his hometown who now worked with the NYPD on special assignments. "Hank, it's Keanu," he said, his voice low but firm. "I need your help." Over the next few minutes, Keanu explained the events in detail, the encounter at the bar, the biker's threat, and the subsequent poisoning. Hank listened carefully, his tone growing more serious with each passing word. "Don't do anything rash, Keanu," Hank warned. "I'll send a team to investigate. Just stay put and let me handle this." Keanu agreed, though a flicker of doubt lingered. He trusted Hank, but part of him felt the need to take action himself. The image of Rocco struggling to breathe was seared into his mind, fueling his determination. The bar revisited. Unable to sit idle, Keanu decided to retrace his steps. He informed Dr. Harper that he'd be back shortly and left the clinic, his thoughts focused on the bar where the trouble had started. The fading light of the evening cast long shadows across the streets as Keanu approached the establishment. Steel Haven Bar looked even more foreboding in the twilight. The row of motorcycles gleamed under the flickering streetlights, their chrome surfaces reflecting a sense of menace. Keanu paused across the street, observing the bikers loitering near the entrance. He recognized the man who had kicked Rocco, his leather vest adorned with a snarling wolf insignia. Keanu's instincts told him to tread carefully. As much as he wanted to confront the man, he knew it would only escalate the situation. Instead, he decided to gather information. An unexpected ally. Keanu approached a young employee sweeping the sidewalk outside the bar. The man, barely in his 20s, looked nervous as Keanu introduced himself. "Hey," Keanu said, keeping his tone friendly. "I don't mean to bother you, but I had some trouble here earlier. Do you know anything about the bikers who hang out here?" The young man glanced over his shoulder before responding. "They're trouble, all right. Been harassing people around here for weeks. Do you know the guy with the wolf patch on his vest?" Keanu pressed. The employee hesitated, clearly afraid. "Yeah, that's Lenny. He's bad news. Runs with a gang called the Iron Wolves. They've been using this place as a front for their activities." Keanu's stomach tightened. "What kind of activities?" The man looked around nervously. "Drugs, mostly. I've heard rumors about them spiking drinks and worse." "You didn't hear it from me." Keanu nodded, his mind racing. This wasn't just about Rocco anymore. These men were a danger to the entire community. A call for backup. Keanu stepped away from the bar, pulling out his phone again. "Hank, it's worse than I thought," he said when the sheriff answered. "The guy who hurt Rocco is tied to a gang called the Iron Wolves. They're using the bar as a front for drug distribution." Hank's response was immediate. "Stay where you are. I'll send a task force to shut them down." Keanu hesitated. "I can't just stand by, Hank. These guys need to be stopped." "Keanu," Hank said firmly, "I need you to trust me on this. We'll handle it, but I need you to stay safe. Don't put yourself in danger." Reluctantly, Keanu agreed. He hung up and found a nearby bench to wait, his heart pounding as he kept a wary eye on the bar. The distant sound of sirens soon reached his ears, a signal that help was on the way. The raid begins. Within minutes, police vehicles surrounded the bar. Officers in tactical gear moved swiftly, their coordinated approach catching the bikers off guard. Keanu watched from a safe distance as the scene unfolded, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and anticipation. Through the bar's grimy windows, he could see the chaos inside. Tables were overturned, and the bikers were forced to the ground as officers conducted searches. One by one, they were led out in handcuffs, their protests drowned out by the commands of the officers. Keanu's eyes locked onto Lenny as he was escorted outside. The man's sneer had been replaced with a look of pure hatred as he spotted Keanu across the street. "You're gonna pay for this, Hollywood," Lenny shouted, his voice filled with venom. Keanu remained impassive, his gaze steady. He didn't need to respond. Justice was already being served. Keanu stayed rooted to the spot as the scene at Steel Haven Bar unfolded before him. The flashing lights of the police vehicles cast a rhythmic glow over the street, illuminating the captured members of the Iron Wolves as they were loaded into the back of patrol cars. Despite the satisfying sight of justice being served, Keanu's thoughts drifted back to Rocco. The image of the dog lying on the exam table, tubes and wires connected to his fragile body, weighed heavily on his heart. As the last of the bikers were led away, Sheriff Hank Morrison stepped out of an unmarked car, his commanding presence cutting through the tension like a knife. Spotting Keanu across the street, Hank waved him over. A critical conversation. Keanu approached the sheriff, his steps measured but purposeful. "Thanks for getting here so quickly," he said, his voice heavy with gratitude. Hank nodded, his expression serious. "It's what we do. These guys have been on our radar for months, but this incident gave us the leverage we needed to take them down. They poisoned Rocco," Keanu said, his tone filled with quiet anger. "Deliberately. I don't know what kind of person does something like that." Hank placed a reassuring hand on Keanu's shoulder. "We'll make sure they answer for it. The evidence we've collected tonight is enough to keep them off the streets for a long time." As they spoke, one of the officers approached with a small evidence bag. Inside was a piece of sausage, its surface glinting with an unidentified substance. "Found this near the bar's entrance," the officer explained. "We'll run tests, but it matches the description of what the dog ingested." Keanu's stomach turned at the sight. "Make sure it's added to the case file," he said firmly. "They need to pay for what they've done." Hank nodded. "Don't worry, Keanu. We'll see this through." A tense reunion. With the immediate danger resolved, Keanu turned his attention back to the clinic. He hurried through the streets, his legs moving faster with each step as he replayed Dr. Harper's words in his mind. The next 24 hours are critical. When he arrived, the receptionist greeted him with a warm but tired smile. "Dr. Harper is in with Rocco now. You can wait here." Keanu nodded, though his restless energy made sitting impossible. He paced the waiting room, his thoughts bouncing between relief that the Iron Wolves were in custody and worry for Rocco's condition. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Harper emerged. Her face, while weary, carried a hint of optimism. "Mr. Reeves, I have good news." Keanu's heart leapt. "Is he okay?" Dr. Harper smiled gently. "Rocco is stable and responding well to treatment. The toxins are being flushed from his system, and his vital signs are improving. He's not out of the woods yet, but his chances are looking much better." A wave of relief washed over Keanu, and he exhaled deeply. "Thank you, doctor. Can I see him?" "Of course," she said, leading him to the recovery area. A moment of hope. Keanu's breath caught as he entered the room. Rocco lay on a cushioned bed, and 4 attached to his paw and monitors tracking his heartbeat. Despite his weakened state, the dog's tail wagged faintly at the sight of Keanu. "Hey, buddy," Keanu said softly, kneeling beside the bed. He reached out to stroke Rocco's head, his fingers brushing gently against the dog's fur. "You're a fighter. You're going to get through this." Rocco let out a low, contented whine, his eyes half closing as Keanu continued to pet him. Dr. Harper observed the interaction with a warm smile. "Animals have an incredible ability to bounce back when they're surrounded by care and love," she said. "I think Rocco's going to be just fine." Keanu nodded, his emotions catching in his throat. "I won't let anything like this happen to him again." The next steps. Over the next several hours, Keanu stayed by Rocco's side, watching as the dog's breathing grew steadier and his energy began to return. Dr. Harper provided updates on his condition and outlined a care plan for the coming weeks. "We'll keep him here overnight for observation," she explained. "But if his progress continues, he can go home tomorrow. He'll need medication and a special diet, but with proper care, he should make a full recovery." Keanu listened intently, committing every detail to memory. "Thank you for everything you've done," he said sincerely. "You saved his life." Dr. Harper smiled. "It's what we're here for. And, Mr. Reeves, you've done more for Rocco than most would. He's lucky to have you." Keanu stayed until the clinic staff gently encouraged him to get some rest. Reluctantly, he agreed, leaving Rocco in their capable hands. As he stepped outside, the cool night air greeted him, a stark contrast to the tension of the day. Reflections under the stars. The walk back to his hotel was quiet, the streets nearly empty. Keanu's mind replayed the day's events, from the encounter with the biker to the raid on Steel Haven Bar. Despite the challenges, he felt a deep sense of gratitude, for Rocco's resilience, for the clinic's dedicated staff, and for the swift action of Hank and his team. As he reached the hotel, his phone buzzed with a message from Hank: "Operation successful. Evidence secured. Your involvement remains confidential. Rest easy, Keanu." Keanu allowed himself a small smile. Justice had been served, and Rocco was on the road to recovery. For the first time that day, he felt a sense of peace. The next morning, Keanu woke earlier than usual, his mind still preoccupied with Rocco. Despite the late-night reflections that had brought him some peace, he was eager to return to the clinic and see how his four-legged companion was doing. After a quick breakfast, he made his way back through the quiet streets of Brooklyn Heights. The city was still waking up, the hum of morning traffic and the occasional bark of a dog filling the air. When the clinic came into view, a wave of nervous anticipation washed over him. Good news at last. Dr. Harper greeted Keanu with a bright smile as he stepped inside. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves," she said warmly. "Rocco's made remarkable progress overnight. He's alert, eating well, and his vitals are stable. I think he's ready to go home." Keanu exhaled deeply, relief flooding through him. "That's the best news I've heard in days. Can I see him?" "Of course," Dr. Harper replied, leading him to the recovery area. When Keanu entered the room, Rocco perked up immediately. The dog's tail wagged energetically, and he let out a happy bark. Keanu couldn't help but smile as he knelt down to greet him. "Hey, buddy," he said, rubbing Rocco's head affectionately. "Looks like you're back to your old self." Dr. Harper chuckled. "He's a tough one, that's for sure. We'll send you home with a list of care instructions and medications. Just make sure he gets plenty of rest and follows the prescribed diet." Keanu nodded. "You've got it. Thank you again, for everything. A hero's return." The journey back to the film set felt triumphant. As Keanu walked through the streets with Rocco trotting happily by his side, he drew smiles and nods from passers-by. Word of the previous day's events had spread, and more than one person stopped to say, "Glad he's okay," or, "You're a good man, Keanu." When they arrived at the set, the crew erupted into cheers and applause. Simon, the lighting technician, approached with a wide grin. "Rocco. You had us all worried, boy." Rocco wagged his tail enthusiastically as crew members came to greet him, showering him with affection. Keanu smiled, grateful for their support. "He's a fighter," he said, his voice filled with pride. Marco Whitman, the director, pulled Keanu aside. "We've adjusted the schedule to give you and Rocco a couple of days to settle back in," he explained. "Take all the time you need." "Thanks, Marco," Keanu replied. "I appreciate it." A community transformed. As the day unfolded, news of the police raid on Steel Haven Bar continued to ripple through the neighborhood. Locals expressed relief at the gang's arrest, and several community members stopped by the set to thank Keanu for his role in bringing attention to the issue. One elderly woman, her hands trembling slightly as she held a leash for her small terrier, approached him during a break. "Mr. Reeves," she said softly, "what you did means a lot to all of us. That gang made life difficult for everyone, but you helped change that." Keanu smiled humbly. "It wasn't just me," he said. "A lot of people worked together to make this happen. I'm just glad we could help." On set, off script. When filming resumed, the bond between Keanu and Rocco was evident in every scene they shared. Their shared ordeal had forged a connection that transcended the script, and it showed in the authenticity of their performances. Between takes, Keanu often found himself reflecting on the events of the past few days. What had started as a simple effort to bond with a canine co-star had turned into a life-or-death struggle that tested his resolve and reinforced his values. Paying it forward. As the weeks passed, Keanu remained involved with the Brooklyn Heights community, quietly supporting local initiatives to improve safety and provide resources for pet owners. He even donated to the veterinary clinic, ensuring they could continue their life-saving work. Rocco, now fully recovered, became a fixture on set, adored by cast and crew alike. He seemed to sense the gratitude and love directed his way, and he never strayed far from Keanu's side. Final reflections. One evening, as the sun set over the city and the last rays of light painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Keanu sat on a park bench with Rocco. The dog rested his head on Keanu's lap, his eyes half closed in contentment. Keanu stroked Rocco's fur, his thoughts drifting. He had faced danger, injustice, and the fragility of life, but through it all, he had witnessed resilience, compassion, and the power of community. Rocco's wagging tail and trusting gaze were a reminder of what truly mattered. "You're a good boy, Rocco," Keanu said softly, his voice carrying the weight of everything they had been through. "And we're going to make sure nothing like that ever happens again." As the city lights flickered to life and the sounds of evening filled the air, Keanu and Rocco sat together, a picture of quiet strength and companionship, a bond unbreakable.